currently on the no-fly list.
This question is for you, Governor Johnson. You would repeal the Affordable Care Act, but so many low-income Americans benefit, as you well know, from extension of Medicaid. How would your plan address the poor's lack of access to health care?
Well, first of all, I don't think it's realistic that we're going to repeal our health care. But when it comes to health care, what we need to do is to bring a free market approach to health care. And by the way, health care is as far removed from free market as it possibly can be. If we had a free market approach to health care, we would not have insurance to cover ourselves for ongoing medical need. We would have insurance to cover ourselves for catastrophic injury and illness, and we would pay as you go in a system that would be absolutely competitive and offer lower prices. So there's no advertised pricing, there's no advertised outcome. When you go to the doctor, you have no idea what it's going to cost. You can't shop the health care that you have. You could have health care savings accounts. I think that having health insurance to cover yourself for ongoing medical need is analogous to having grocery insurance. Imagine, and something we don't have, but imagine the grocery shopping experience if you had grocery insurance. Go to the grocery store, no prices on the counters whatsoever. When it comes to ground round or filet, I'm going to have to take filet every single time because I have grocery insurance. I just think that there are so many ways that the government could create real competition in the healthcare area, allowing us to buy prescriptions from Canada. How long would the high prices of prescriptions exist in this country if we were allowed to buy in Canada? They would last about a nanosecond.
Dr. Stein, this question is for you. Speaking of healthcare, you have denounced Big Pharma as corrupt and abusive. If my research is true, you have either held or hold stock investments in the pharmaceutical giant Merck. If that is true, tell me yes, and if so, why?
So I actually gave up, sold, divested from Merck. I will say that my husband still has some Merck. We have separate financial policies. I have divested from Merck, from GE, from DuPont, from the real bad actors out there, and am predominantly invested in index funds and mutual funds that are broadly distributed into an economy which is very problematic and which is dominated, again, by pharmaceuticals, by health insurance, by war profiteering, by fossil fuel industries. And I am interested in moving my money in order to support better investment. But, you know, I think it's really important that we fight for change regardless. So most investors actually are part of this reprehensible economy, and that should not stop us from fighting to change that economy, which is critical.
This question is for you, Dr. Stein. Your plan to lower the national debt is to end, as you call it, neoliberal austerity measures and to increase spending. For those who hear those two things as counterintuitive, maybe even counterproductive, how do you respond?
Yeah, so it's widely understood now by many economists that in the presence of a recession or an economy that is struggling, that austerity is the worst thing that you can do, that it is counterproductive, that it prevents the economy from recovering. We know that, for example, from the experience in Europe with Greece, for example. We know that from U.S. experience prior to the Great Depression. Recently, the International Money Fund issued a report saying that austerity is exactly the wrong thing, that you need to invest in the economy. The Federal Reserve said the same thing. So we're calling for prudent investments to recreate a productive economy. What I'm calling for, a Green New Deal, is the antidote to NAFTA and to the Trans-Pacific Partnership and to these so-called trade agreements, which are basically crony capitalist trade agreements that send our jobs overseas and depress our wages here at home. Instead, we need to be creating these jobs here at home and growing our way out of this debt.
Governor Johnson, this question is for you. As a fiscal conservative, how do you explain that when you were elected governor of New Mexico, you inherited a debt of $1.8 billion, but left office with a debt of $4.6 billion?
That is absolutely horse is what that is. I have no idea where that came from. I actually saw that article, and I have no idea. There is absolutely no basis in fact for that. None.
All right. Enough said. Gary Johnson, we will go to this question, and this is for you. You oppose cap and trade because you've said so many times, and yet acknowledge man-made climate change. So how do you propose that we fight global warming?
Well, I think the free market, if you use coal as an example, has basically has actually bankrupted marginal coal at the moment. Right now, coal makes up about 36% of our electrical load. And right now, nobody's going to build a coal-fired plant because natural gas is much cheaper. So you can figure on coal being phased out. The coal that is currently marketable is the Wyoming coal, and there may be others in this country, but I think the free market has done that. I think you and I, as consumers, are demanding less carbon emission, and we're seeing that happen. Looking at cap and trade, I was open and would be open as President of the United States, and having been governor of New Mexico, I'm open to any discussion that I think might make things better, cost less, work better. So looking at cap and trade, it was that pretense that I was looking at cap and trade that this might actually work. Well, apparently, this is my assessment and many others, is that it's just a bit too complex and that it actually wouldn't work.
Before I move on to Dr. Stein, since I got 20 seconds left here, since you called it horse, you know what do you recall the deficit was that you left New Mexico with?
Well, I left New Mexico with $1 billion surplus, and when I took office, you could argue that there was a $1 billion surplus.
Okay. Dr. Stein, your platform has proposed to kick off a job-producing energy program based on clean, safe, and renewable energy. You referenced that earlier in this conversation, and you denounce reliance on coal. But coal is cheap, so how does your energy plan affect poor people?
Great. So, and let me say, it's not just coal, but it is fracking and natural gas as well. The science tells us that that is every bit as devastating. In fact, we know that natural gas, also called methane, is 80 times more powerful as carbon dioxide and the usual fossil fuel emissions of carbon dioxide. So it's not like natural gas represents the market taking care of this problem. Not whatsoever. It represents how the market gets stuck in putting profit over people and the planet. And let me tell you how this is good for people. The way this is good for people is that we create a nationally subsidized program to create these jobs in clean, renewable energy, and that we ensure that the cost is affordable. Right now, we pay so much in health care costs related to fossil fuels that by moving to zero fossil fuels, we save so much money, it's actually enough to pay the costs of the green energy transformation. So when you balance out the savings in our health care and the savings in the military, where we no longer need these wars for oil that consume half of our discretionary budget and almost half of your income taxes, we save so much money through those two offsets, also by moving our subsidies, tens of billions of dollars, into green energy subsidies, that we can ensure that this is a win, especially for poor people, because they are the first in line for these jobs, which are good wage, living wage jobs.
This question is for you, Dr. Stein. You want to increase affirmative action programs, yet recent Supreme Court decisions, as you know, have started to limit these programs. How do you respond?
Well, there are various ways that we can ensure that these programs are targeted to the areas of greatest need. So as you know, unemployment rates are highest in the communities of color, particularly in the African American community. And the way that this Green New Deal works, which is like the New Deal that got us out of the Great Depression, so it's not a hypothetical, it's not an abstraction, it's something we have done before and that we put money into. Those jobs are targeted first to the communities of greatest need, and whether we define that on the basis of communities of color or on the basis of the highest unemployment rates, those jobs will get to the communities of color that need them the most.
Governor Johnson, you are for the abolition of affirmative action. To some people, that might sound a bit if not racist, racial. How would you respond to that kind of criticism?
Well, I think that so many of these government programs had a place, and let's just argue for a second that affirmative action was positive. I just think it perhaps has outgrown its positive. I think this is an example of crony capitalism. Crony capitalism, when government picks winners and losers. I think affirmative action, for the most part, is gamed. And that those that know how to game it, and I think we've grown beyond affirmative action.
Let me get this last question. I'm out of time. I want to get one more in, but I don't have enough time to give them both a fair chance to respond. A couple of things I wanted to get to tonight that we did not get to tonight. That is our program for tonight. We talked about,
that was too quick.
I know. I told you it was going to go fast.
Anyway,
that's our show for tonight. We talked, of course, about domestic policy. Tomorrow night, we will talk in the second part of our conversation, our forum about foreign policy. We will see you back here tomorrow night for night 2 of our presidential forum featuring Dr. Jill Stein of the Green Party and former New Mexico Governor Gary Johnson of the Libertarian Party. Tomorrow night, foreign policy. We'll see you then. Until then, thanks for watching, and as always, keep the faith.